Thanks for listening to the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, here to help educate, motivate, and put you on the right path to take control of your health through weekly discussions on topics in the medical field, public health arena, and in your community. And now your host, Dr. Barry.
And welcome to another episode of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. I'm your host, Dr. Barry Pierre, your favorite board-certified internist, founder of drbarrypierre.com, as well as the CEO of Pierre Medical Consulting, helping you empower yourself for better health with the number one podcast for patient advocacy, affirmation, and education. This week, again, we are on the topic of men. Obviously, this is Men's Health Awareness Month, so we got to talk about the man this month. And I'm having a personal conversation just on mental health, right? Really, we're going to talk some signs, but like really no certain numbers and facts, just obvious observations that I have seen as a physician, as someone who has taken care of a lot of men, during my time at outpatient and the inpatient setting, and really kind of stressing again the importance of mental health. So we're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about depression. We're going to talk about how it typically, exudes in men, right? Like not the, moping and, sauntering around, even though there are some men who do that. And really we're going to talk about why I think that's the case. So like always, if you have not had a chance to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, share this out to 5 or 10 of your male friends who need to get their stuff together, just so they can be mentally aware and how to be a more functioning adult, right? Because I think if your mental isn't there, your physical isn't there, your spiritual isn't there. Like it just is what it is. So check me out on this episode of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Lunch and Learn Community Merchandise Store, living out the motto, empower yourself for better health. And for the thanks to being a devoted podcast listener, I'm going to give you opportunity to save 10% off today's purchase using the coupon code EMPOWER10. Go to shop.drbarrypierre.com. Use the coupon code EMPOWER10, all one word. You will save 10% off your entire purchase. Remember, 50% of all proceeds are donated to the 5-Star Scholarship Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization giving out scholarships for high school students. Today, we are going to be talking about men and more importantly, depression, really mental health just in general. We're going to have really just a kind of candid conversation, that I want you guys to kind of listen to and understand kind of where we got to this point and, what we really need to do to change it. All right. And I think if you're going to talk about men's health, like you can't just talk about lung cancer. You can't just talk about the alcohol related issues. You can't just talk about prostate cancer. All these things that are very easy to have a conversation about it, because those are kind of real, tangible, especially from, something that you can kind of feel and notice. But what we need to really have this conversation, especially when we talk about men, is really like, what is their mental health like? Like, what is their ability to be able to kind of deal with all of the stress and pressures that we know has been placed upon them. Some self-placed, some societally placed. Like, what are some of those stressors? And more importantly, when you are getting those stressors, what are you actually doing about said stressors? I can tell you as a physician, when I'm taking care of patients, it's always, especially my men are always taken aback. Like when I ask them just kind of general, like, yeah, so how are you feeling? Like, what's life like? When I ask them kind of, I guess they're used to me talking about their blood pressure and cholesterol and those random things. But when I start asking more emotionally related, centering questions, it kind of flushes them because I could tell they're not used to having that conversation. And I'll be honest, the lack, right, of experience in being able to kind of have these conversations and be able to really think through what's going on with us has been killing us, right? And it manifests in so many different ways. Like, I wanted to start off, right? I did an Empower Yourself Better Health series, probably a couple of years ago, where I talked about, how, we shouldn't be telling boys to man up, right? Like I wasn't going to tell my son to man up. And there was I got a lot of different reaction from her. But the most important one and most important reason why I wanted to do it is because I recognized that me telling him to man up wasn't allowing him to explore all of the emotional spectrum that any human has the ability to explore. And because I was trying to, and I tried before, but like, because when you try to put people in a box, right, especially men, and you say, man up, you have to do things a certain way, and you don't allow them to express the way they want to express, it presents itself as an adult. And obviously I take care of a lot of adults. I'm an internist. So I take care of adults, but I can see a lot of childhood related traumas and, issues that likely could have been resolved if they had the opportunity to do so. And that's why, again, we stress about, again, when I talk about mental health, and I always try to say, we need to talk about the mental. We need to talk about the mental. It's not the fact that, again, my wife happens to be a mental health therapist, right? And I'm biased, even though that does help. I can tell you that does help. Having a therapist on your side definitely allows you to ask questions, receive questions and answers in a much more, efficient way, right, to get things done. And I think as men, like, we have to be able to kind of, again, not only be able to be a source, right, of protection, like we always want to be that source of protection, but we need to be able to have someone that we can also say, like, hey, I need some help. I'm having some issues. I'm having some concerns. Because the terms I'm sad, the terms I'm tired, the terms I'm depressed, like, those are terms that men should be able to have, as open as freely as they say, like, oh, hey, I worked 10 hours. Hey, I did this crazy thing in the gym. Like, we should be able to have those conversations just as easily. And what I see happen a lot, especially for, the men I've taken care of, is that, not having that ability to have that conversation is so detrimental, because again, we don't present, again, one, because we've never been taught to, but we don't present the kind of a certain way, right? And like, obviously I want to talk about depression, right? Depression is a big issue that I see a lot in men, but it's not the typical thing that we see on TV, right? Typically, when we think about depression is a mood disorder. It's a mood disorder. All right, it is what it is. It is a mood disorder, right? That typically, right, and I want to make sure we kind of hammer it home. Typically, leaves people downtrodden, leaves people irritable, trouble sleeping, trouble eating, trouble doing the normal activities without experiencing any joy from it. Right. But unfortunately, in a lot of men, it does not present this way. You're not going to see typically men just sulk around, right? You're not typically going to see men say, yeah, I'm having so much trouble sleeping, or I'm sleeping too much, right? Those aren't usually conversations that we typically have. Usually when you run into issues, especially with men who are dealing with depression, one of the things I like to say is, like, what kind of stresses are you placing upon yourself? Like, what type of load are you trying to place on your shoulders that is obvious you can't, shoulder anymore, right? Pardon the pun. And you'd be surprised how many men are unaware of all of the responsibilities that they are placing upon themselves that they can't meet the demand for. And because they can't meet the demand for it, it exacerbates in certain ways, right? Like, they all of a sudden they don't feel, like going out, or all of a sudden they don't feel, eating. All of a sudden they don't feel like taking care of themselves, right? So again, when we talked about this before, it's really encompassing. When we talk about how men don't really go to the doctor's office, they don't get their annual checkups, they don't take their medications. There's a lot of things that they don't do. One, I'm not saying it's purposeful, but one is because they've never really been taught. All right. And I think a lot of that kind of goes down to, again, just having that mental awareness of, hey, something's going on and I need to be able to take care of it. But because they've never been taught and, approached and given the space to be able to say, yes, I want to take care of it, I see the downslopes, right? I see, the man who has a heart attack. I see the man who has a stroke. I see the man who has uncontrolled diabetes, right? And because it presents in that way, understanding that when I backtrack it, I say, well, yeah, look, this person's been stressed for a long time, right? And we have to be, able, you're very cautious of it. So, I talked about the fact of manning up, right? Especially when we think about mental health, when we think about depression, men don't like to talk. Trust me, they don't. I know it's like pulling teeth sometimes with them. And because they don't like to talk, they tend to repress and suppress a lot of their feelings, right? That are keeping them down. And I talked about how a lot of these things are usually self-inflicted, right? There's societal pressures out there. Like if you're a man, you're supposed to be able to provide, you're supposed to be able to lead, you're supposed to be able to do all these things here. But we're living in a world where thankfully, right, women don't need that, right? They don't need you to provide. They don't need you to lead, right? They want to be on a team. And there are a lot of men, unfortunately, who don't know how to deal with that. Right. There are a lot of men emotionally who don't know how not to, how not to be the head of the household per se. Right. And when we think about head of a household, a lot of times when I even say that term, men tend to think about that in the terms of a financial standpoint, not even a leadership, but just a financial. Like if I'm not making the most money, I'm not the head of the household. If I'm not the head of the household, who am I? Right. They define themselves in these outdated terms and these outdated, societal pressures, right? And it beats them up, right? So then they go to work, right? Knowing that, I don't lead the way I want to lead, right? They don't take their medication. They don't do all of the normal things that they typically would do, right? Because there's a lot of pressures that are placed upon them. So let's just read and let's think about some of the signs of depression kind of associated in men, right? That, again, doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, that's not really depressed, but for us, right? For us, and I say us again, I'm a man, right? For us, right? It sounds so obvious. So, anger, irritability, being very aggressive, feeling anxious, restless, on the edge, loss of interest at work, family, problems with sexual desire, performance. Think about it, right? So when we're depressed, right? So imagine, again, I get a lot of patients who come to my office because of, sexual dysfunction. It doesn't work as well as it used to. But when when I peel back the layers, right, you start realizing like, wow, there's some emotional, roadblocks that you need to jump over before you can get to the point where sexually you can perform the way you want to perform. And imagine, again, like I said, we talked about this societal pressure. Imagine now you're a man, right, and you don't have the sexual prowess that, you people expect a man to have, right? You don't have, women or men flocking over you that you expect. Like all of these things that you don't feel desired, right? So all of these things just kind of keep eating at you, right? And it's the reason why, suicides, is obviously much more, frequent in an occurrence in men, right? Because what happens is that they have no outlet, right? And more importantly, I should stress this. They perceive to have no outlet to say like, hey, I'm having these issues. Hey, I'm having these concerns, right? Because again, remember as a young man, as a boy, they're told, man up, deal with yourself, suck it up. Like, so they were never given that opportunity to cry it out. They were never given that opportunity to kind of just let out their feelings or issues, right? And so they felt like it's normal for them to repress. And if it's normal for them to repress, it's normal for that guy to depress. It's normal for that guy to depress. Everyone's repressing their feelings, right? But they're not. But when it comes out, because it always comes out, it never comes out in the way that you would expect, right? So that's why they get angry. That's why they're irritable. Physical aches and pains, headaches, cramps, difficulty, meeting responsibilities, engaging in high risk activities. Again, remember we talked about it. One of the, big reasons why men have a shorter life expectancy, than women, right, is because not only, are they not going to see their doctor, but they perform and, participate in much more higher risk activities, than women, right? And again, so when you think about it, like why they do these things, we have to point to the mental. I've always said this. You need to be healthy in kind of three facets. You have to be healthy physically, you have to be healthy mentally, you have to be healthy spiritually, right? Like if you are not healthy in all three of those facets, right, there's always going to be, again, a chair missing. You're always going to be leaning. You're always not going to be standing firm on a foundation. And if you want the most optimum health, you have to be firm on the foundation that you're laying upon. And mental health is something that unfortunately we don't talk about enough in men. And when I say we, I say the men, right? Because again, remember, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm calling out the men, right? It's about this personal responsibility. Because again, there's plenty of options to talk out there. Plenty of therapy services. There's plenty of people who want to listen to your problems to help you get through your problems. But if we don't open ourselves up and say, yes, I am having these problems. Yes, I need some solutions. Please help me. Like we won't get nowhere. Need for alcohol and drugs. Again, when we start thinking about the activities of men, and, asking ourselves, why are they doing these things? Why are they acting these certain ways? Again, I'm on social media a lot, right? So I know there's kind of this, this anger, right? Like I see it a lot, right? There's a lot of anger towards women from men, right? And you're asking yourself, like, why are they so angry, right, with the gender? Why are they so angry with the opposite gender? What did the opposite gender do to them? And when you backtrack it, right, it's because they haven't been taught how to talk. They haven't been taught how to express. They haven't been taught how to deal with their personal problems. So they expound it and they let it out, right? Domestic violence is rampant. Alcohol use is rampant. Drug use is rampant. Not going to see the doctor is rampant. Like all these, again, men, high risk activities, men, like all of these problems that we're seeing, right? It's again, I don't want to say it's all because their mental isn't, there, but like you have to address that there is some component of not having that mental stability that needs to be there, right? That's affecting not only the men, right? Not only the men, but more importantly, the children, more importantly, the women in their lives, more importantly, their family members, their friends. Like it's everyone gets affected, right? When men don't do what they need to do, right? And this is not a societal pressure of, that's outdated. No, if we want, right, to have the most optimum community around us, whether it be friends, whether it be family members, right, we have to personally look at ourselves and say, what am I doing to make sure I'm physically fit? What am I doing to make sure I'm spiritually fit? What am I doing to make sure I'm mentally fit? And if we can't answer those three questions, then that's we have to say, what do I need to do? Because there's options aplenty, right? There's options aplenty to get the help. We just need to go out there and get it. And that's why I love, having, a month like Men's Health Awareness Month, right? Because again, now the spotlight kind of gets shine right on like, hey, men, get like, it's time, right? And again, we're going to talk about prostate cancer. That's definitely going to be talked about. We're going to talk about, the sexual dysfunction. Definitely going to be talked about. But like you can't have a whole month go by, right, and not address, I think, one of the biggest elephants in the room, right, which is men getting their mental health together, right, and which will help lead, right, and improve all these different functions, right? Getting their depression together, getting their anxiety together, getting their panic related concerns together, right? Getting the amount of stress that they placed on themselves together, getting all of these things together. They get that together. All of a sudden, they're coming to the doctor's office to get their annual checkup. All of a sudden, they're not resorting to drinking and alcohol. All of a sudden, they're not resorting to domestic violence, right? Beating up their partners, beating up their children, right? They're not resorting to those things because they know there's another avenue, right? Like, I don't need to express any anger over being depressed. I can actually talk about being depressed. I can be open about being depressed. But if they don't know how to do that, or they are not willing to do that, then you see all of these others spiral. So by the time they come to see me, it's not just this person has, an alcohol problem. It's not that this person, is angry, aggressive. Like, no, like is that they don't know how to deal with that stress that's been placed upon them. And they've never had people challenge them to say like, hey, it's time to get it together and it's okay. Because I've championed, again, like I said, I'm biased. My wife's a mental health therapist. I like talking about mental health because I realized once I made the Once I made the switch in me and saying like, all right, my mental needs to be as sharp and as focused as the way I practice medicine, like my life took off for the better. Right. Like, if you ask, my friends and family around me, like I'm one of the more like happy and jovial people you'll ever see. Why? It's because I understand that not that I don't deal with stress. It's just that I know how to deal with stress. I know how to deal when it comes my way, right? Because there's not going to be a situation where you're not going to have some stressful event happen to you. I'm in medicine. It happens all the time. That's not going to occur. The question occurs is when that stressful event occurs to you, how are you going to present yourself? Are you going to be, again, we talked about the science. Are you going to be angry? Are you going to be irritable? Are you going to have trouble finishing your work? Are you going to, go and, rely on some alcohol or some cigarettes or some other illicit drugs to try to relax you, calm you down, but not actually deal with that problem at hand? Like, what are you going to do to make sure that your mental health is priority number one? That's all we want to know. Right. And by we, this is the community around you. We just want to know, what are you going to do to make sure your mental health is number one, primary uno. Like I said, again, like I talk about mental, physical, and spiritual. Again, I feel like if your mental is there, these other things kind of get taken care of itself. But I think what I see a lot in men is that the mental isn't there. Right. And if the mental isn't there, I don't think you have anything else. So yeah, that's just me. Right. Like, again, like I said, we weren't going to have a month of mental health awareness month. We weren't going to have a men's health awareness month and not talk about the mental, not talk about its effect on everything else. Right. Because again, you're not here, right, just to listen to me, explain that you should be taking your blood pressure medications. You're not here to explain that you should be going to the gym more. You're not here for those things. You're here to get the all around compass. Again, empower yourself for better health. How do we do that? How do we empower ourselves for better health if we try to ignore one of the significant pillars of health is being mentally healthy fit? I am yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre, and I'm going to see you next week. Thank you for coming to the end of the episode. It is yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre. I want to give my undying thanks to you for your support. Just getting to the end of the episode means that you at least enjoyed today's episode. Hope you were empowered by today's episode. Please remember to share this episode with at least 2 people that you know that would be greatly affected if they did not listen to today's episode. And if you have not already done so, subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can leave a review. Leave a review there because your support is so valuable for what we're doing here on the Lynch Learn and everything with Pierre Medical Consulting. And if you have not done so, go ahead and join the listserv. To join the listserv is very easy. Just grab your phone right now. I'll pause. Join the listserv. You want to text Lunch Learn Pod. This is all going to be one word, Lunch Learn Pod, to 44222. And you'll be on the listserv. You'll know exactly when new episodes are coming out. You'll know about new episodes before they actually come out, because I usually tell my listserv members, hey, this is what I'm working on. These are the guests that you should expect to hear for the week on. Thanks, guys. You have a blessed day, and I'm going to see you guys next week.